Hello everyone, my name is Chris Schaefer. I am the president of the Heritage Lake POA Board of Directors. I want to share with you information about an upcoming initiative the board is driving to encourage the community to vote in the upcoming covenant change petition. This isn't something new this year. There have been several attempts at this over the years because this board, along with previous boards, believes this is in the best interest of our community today and in the future. This video won't get into all the details around the petition, but it is intended to inform you that there is a series of videos that will help explain elements of the petition, why the board believes this is important, and what it means for this community. We want to make sure that you know and understand what this is all about before you vote. We know there has been a lot of confusion and misinformation in the past, and we want to try to explain things a little better this time around in order to help you make an informed decision. It's not fun to read through stacks of documents or try to interpret legal jargon associated with voting procedures and binding documents. Who's got the time or energy for that? Your POA board has done that work for you in conjunction with our attorney, and I will attempt to explain it in terms we can all understand in this video series. I will combine high-level explanation with deeper facts and details so you can get the level of detail that you want. You will see members of the board and the staff a great deal more this coming year at community events, social gatherings, at the marina and the POA office, as well as board, ops, and committee meetings with dedicated time for community questions regarding this petition. So if you have any questions or want to discuss this or anything else, please come up to us and let's chat. We want you to ask questions if you have them. We want to have discussions with you around the issues that are on the table. We are dedicated to making sure you have all the information you need to confidently make your choice and cast your vote. This was the first in a series of 8 videos created to help explain the Covenant campaign. Hello everyone, my name is Chris Schaefer. I'm the president of the Heritage Lake POA Board of Directors and want to share with you information about an upcoming initiative that has pretty big implications with regard to the future of this community. This video is the second in a series of 8 meant to help you understand the background, reasons for, and answers to your questions around the Covenant petition. Hopefully, you've already seen Introduction to Heritage Lake Covenant videos, which helps explain the information being shared and the reason we're working so hard to explain the issues before us. This video will focus on an explanation of how the bylaws and covenants work and how they impact the way we manage our community. The short answer to what bylaws and covenants are and why you should care is this. Those are the legal documents that define how our POA is run and what our rights are as members of the POA. Only the board vote to approve bylaw changes, and only the community can vote for covenant changes. You have the power to change the covenants. You always have. You need to know how and why it may be in your best interest to do so. You should care because the outdated covenants are preventing us from taking advantage of the technology and tools of today's world and are keeping us locked in the rules defined over 40 years ago. We are a much different community now, and our needs are different than they were back then. Now for the detail behind the answer. This is a little longer, but it's more in depth. The Board of Directors for this community provides oversight of the budget, expenditures, projects, approves and oversees our work that our committees do, and seeks to make sure all of that is done legally. There are 2 very important documents which essentially define the rules for operation as an association. The first of these important documents is known as the bylaws. These are a set of rules which help define the POA organization, outlines election and voting rules, meeting rules, and rules established by and for the Board of Directors. In a nutshell, our bylaws help us define the rules by which our board and community leadership operates. The bylaws may be altered, amended, or repealed by majority of the vote of the Board of Directors, providing changes are not in violation of our covenants or Indiana law. This means that the board can change the bylaws without a vote from the community. Any board-approved changes made to the bylaws are reviewed and approved by the POA attorney and filed with the Putnam County Recorder. So in summary, bylaws are relatively easy to modify with an affirmative vote by the board and, after the vote and filing, the changes become legally binding. The first governing bylaws were written in 1976, and since that time have been updated over 20 times. The second document, and the focus of this voting campaign, is the Declaration of Covenants for Heritage Lake. We commonly refer to these as the covenants. The covenants define membership rights with respect to voting, property ownership rules and restrictions, assessments, A&E committee guidelines, and building guidelines. These, like the bylaws, are legally binding. But unlike the bylaws, changes to covenants may only be made if 2/3 of all lot owners vote formally to do so. Today, 2/3 of the owners equates to about 1,900 votes. Before a covenant change proposal can even be distributed to our community, it must first be approved by our attorney to ensure all wording complies with any legal requirements. The covenants, like the bylaws, were also written in 1970-something, and they've been updated a total of 0 times since their creation. That's not a single change since the time they were written over 40 years ago. 40 years ago, there were no mobile phones, no internet. There were a few years after seatbelts were required nationally, and we all used rotary phones. In 2014, the Long-Term Planning Committee, who's tasked with continuously developing initiatives focusing on the long-term needs of our community, solicited a company named O'Neill Research LLC to create a strategic plan for our community with the outcome defining the requirements for land use, watershed management, road maintenance, emergency services, government and community relations, and governance. The following extracts are taken directly from that plan, which illustrates the concerns about the limitations of our current covenants. Number 1, input from the steering committee, key informant interviews, focus groups, and surveys indicate that there are serious concerns about the capacity of the present governing framework to manage a growing community. Number 2, Heritage Lake is now a compact community of over 3,000 people and is much larger than many towns such as Cloverdale. However, its covenants provide a legal framework for managing a subdivision and not governing a community. This puts Heritage Lake at a disadvantage in terms of taking decisive action to improve basic services such as road maintenance and assure the health and safety of its residents. Number 3, a major effort to inform and educate property owners on the undemocratic nature of the present system. Each subdivision has a vital veto in making amendments, and non-resident property owners have a vote on what services residents will receive. The recommended action from that plan was to organize and implement a long-term campaign to build support among property owners, both residents and non-residents, to amend the covenants in order to create a governing framework based on more representative principles. That gives us pretty good reason to keep pursuing the changes that we're proposing. Additionally, last year's effort included 3 different mailings to get all lot owners to vote. We received less than 50% of the ballots back. So even though around 70% of those returned were yes votes to change the covenants, we couldn't do it because we didn't receive the required 2/3 all lot owner ballots to meet the 1,900-something threshold. It was clear to the board that those who did vote, the overwhelming majority, were in favor of the proposed changes. We are acting now on behalf of those members of the majority. For those who didn't return their ballots, there's no way for us to determine whether it was because they assumed abstaining would be counted as a no vote, or abstaining wouldn't have an impact, or they didn't understand the reason or the implication of the vote. So we're trying again. We're trying to be better. We're trying to better explain the issues and answer questions, so please reach out to any member of the board if we've missed something in these videos. We want to help. Both the covenants and the bylaws are available at your request from the office or on the HLPOA website. This was the second in a series of 8 videos created to help explain the covenant campaign. Hello everyone, my name is Chris Schaefer. I'm the president of the Heritage Lake POA Board of Directors. This is the third in a series of videos to provide background on the issues before us with the current covenant petition. Hopefully, you've already seen the previous 2 videos, which were basically just an introduction to what this is all about and an explanation of what bylaws and covenants are and why they're important to us. In the third video here, I will talk about rules, bylaws, and covenant changes, how they're managed, and the voting rules to change them. The short answer to what the difference is between rule, bylaw, and covenant changes is this. Changes to the rules are requested by members or committees to the board, and the board votes on whether to approve them. Board controlled. Bylaw changes are usually requested by a board member and voted on by the board. Board controlled. Covenant changes may be requested by a member of the community, a committee, or a board member, and the request is investigated and worked by the board and the attorney to generate a ballot and take it to the community for vote. Community controlled. Only a yes vote by 2/3 of all lot owners can change a covenant. Now for the detail behind the answer. This is a bit longer. Rules in our community include general, lake, A&E, campground, bylaws, and covenants. Making changes to each of these rule types requires us to follow specific voting processes. Some are community rules and may not be legally binding. This means they don't require to be approved by legal counsel or filed with the county. Sometimes we still consult with our attorney to ensure we're not unintentionally violating any county ordinances or state laws. We have committees that take ownership of managing those rules which apply to their work the committee does. For example, the Lake Committee manages lake rules. When a committee wants to make changes to their rules, they define the change and present them to the board at an operations meeting. If the board agrees that the change is a good one, the board adds the rule change to the next board meeting agenda for discussion and vote. It can only be voted on at a board meeting because that's the only place that the board can officially vote on issues. Members of the community attending the meeting also may ask questions if they have any. If that discussion doesn't result in further answers being sought or disagreement with any of the elements of the request, the board will vote on whether to accept the change or not. If accepted, a motion is made by a board member, voted on, and the rules updated in the association rules and communicated to the membership. Typically, most rule changes are proposed towards the end of the year after evaluation of how things went and what may need to be changed. That also works from a timing perspective so that the new rule can make it into the next year's rule books. If the board votes no to a proposed rule change, the change does not get added to the rules. Duh, makes sense, right? Bylaw changes can be proposed and implemented only by the board. The board has sole authority to change the bylaws. Here's the 3-step process. Step 1. Proposed changes are presented to the board at an operations meeting. Step 2. If agreed by the board, the proposed bylaw change is then added to the next board meeting agenda where the change will be read, discussed, and a motion to accept will be made and voted upon. Most often, this will require 2 readings and 2 votes in consecutive board meetings. But exceptions are allowed if it is agreed by the board that not doing so would have a detrimental impact on the community or the board. Time sensitivity may be a consideration in that determination. Step 3. Once the changes are approved, they are signed by the POA board president and secretary, notarized, and sent to our attorney who then files it with the Putnam County. Bylaw changes are always reviewed by the POA attorney to ensure they don't violate our covenants, state laws, or county ordinances. The changes are legally binding. Making bylaw changes is not that complicated, but they are more complicated than rule changes, and that legal review is required. These 2 types of changes, rules and bylaws, may only be made through an official vote by the board of directors. The most complicated rules to change are our covenants. The biggest difference between covenant changes and bylaw and rule changes is that covenant changes require a 2/3 yes vote of the entire membership if the changes are to be made. That means if we have 3,000 lots at Heritage Lake, we would need 2,000 yes votes to make even a minor change. Each lot that a member owns represents a single vote. If you vote 3 lots, you get 3 votes. If you own 3 lots, you get 3 votes. If you think this sounds reasonable, please keep in mind that since their creation over 40 years ago, these have not been changed once. Our covenants were written during a period of time when our community was being established. The developer's vision was 6 neighborhoods being sequentially constructed. Each time a neighborhood was ready for construction, the neighborhood covenants were filed. The developer envisioned a community having very strict views on what the architecture, infrastructure, and issues were at the time. We have been locked into that view for 40 years and we have virtually no ability to change it. This is the 5-step process we are forced to follow for covenant changes. Step 1. A member identifies a covenant that they feel needs updating and brings that request to the board at an operations meeting. The board discusses the request, identifies the specific section of the covenants to determine whether it makes sense to pursue a change to support the request. If agreed, it gets added to the next board meeting agenda. If it is determined that the change shouldn't or couldn't be made, it ends there. Step 2. A designated board member consults with the attorney to review the requested change, define and document the legal verbiage needed to the article and section, and researches any conflict or violation with existing local, county, or state statutes or laws. A new draft of the covenant is written to incorporate the changes, including any other sections of the document that may be impacted by that change. Additionally, a petition defining the changes to be voted upon is created by the board member and attorney, along with review of any other legally binding documentation or processes required to take the covenant change request to the community for official vote. The content of the petition is strictly defined to include the member name, lot number or numbers, the signature, their vote, yes or no, the date the ballot must be returned by, and also must include a copy of the changes and an explanation of the changes being requested. This process can take several months or even years. That's only step 2. Step 3. Once the required updates and documentation have been completed, it is reviewed by the board. If the board requests any modification to what's been done, it needs to go back to the attorney to ensure that the requested changes are allowed and the words used are correct. Step 4. Assuming the first 3 steps are completed and correct, the required documents are sent to each lot owner, including those who reside at the lake and those who don't. Every eligible voting member is sent their ballot in the mail. It is true, however, that if the contact information on file with the office is not correct, a member or members may not receive their ballot. That's why we often encourage lot owners to update their contact information with the office if what they've previously supplied has been changed. Often, in an effort to get petitions returned from those who hadn't responded before the deadline, a second or even third mailing will go to those who hadn't previously returned their ballots. This is a huge administrative effort and significant cost burden to the community. Counting and tabulating the ballots is completed by a designated member who acts in complete confidentiality with respect to the vote of individual members. They do, however, record which lots have been voted and the standing count of yes and no votes to help determine whether additional effort is needed to go after the votes not yet returned. Step 5. As previously stated, our covenants have never been changed after many efforts by the community over the years. If a covenant change did happen to pass, though, the next step would be to consult again with the attorney to provide evidence of the voting and ballot results, and the attorney would then file the updated covenants with the county. Covenants are legally binding. We have learned a lot over the years about how the process works and what things we struggle with. In response to those lessons, we have expanded ways we may now vote to include electronic voting. Electronic voting can take on many forms. Petitions may be returned via mail, fax, through a voting website, email attachment, and text photo of the completed ballot. Designated members of the community manage the petition distribution and handling of returned petitions. This ensures the integrity of the voting process is maintained. It is important to note that no member of the board will touch any petition once they're distributed or returned. This process is consistent with all ballot voting processes. That will not change in the future. The board of directors doesn't touch the ballot or return votes at any time. The board does request updates from those who do manage the petitions to understand how many have been received, how many are yes, how many are no, and how many may be invalid because they were incorrectly completed. We're excited to bring this community improved ways of voting, and we hope that this will encourage all of our members to vote this year. This will ensure that the future votes will reflect what the voting majority in this community wants. This was the third in a series of 8 videos created to help explain the Covenant campaign. I hope this helped you understand a little bit more about how these elements all fit together.
What is this petition all about and why is it such a big deal? Hello everyone, my name is Chris Schaefer. I am the president of the Heritage Lake POA Board of Directors, and want to share with you information about the Covenant petition and other documents you have received. This video is the fourth in a series of 8 intended to help all property owners understand the background, reasons for, and to provide answers to questions about this petition. Hopefully you've already seen, Introduction to Heritage Lake Covenant videos, What the heck are bylaws and covenants and why should I care? And what's the difference between rule, bylaw, and covenant changes? This video will focus specifically on what we're trying to change and why. The short answer to what we're trying to change and why, is this: we are trying to change the way votes are managed for covenant changes, to allow us to support changes that the majority of voting members want. We have been and continue to be controlled by members who do not vote their lots, resulting in blocking the changes that the community and board feel are in our best interests. The non-voting majority is controlling our ability to support the voting majority. I do not believe our covenants are broken and many of the restrictions in the covenants remain reasonable. I do believe the restrictions which govern our ability to change the covenants themselves are unreasonable. So much so, that in 40+ years, they've not been changed a single time. Right now, the entire community, including members who may live out of state and don't respond to voting opportunities and even members who have not paid their dues, has the opportunity to vote on every covenant issue before us. Yet we only typically receive about 50% of the votes needed to pass, or fail, a ballot. Those who actually vote have no voice. I would like to remind you that the voting members of the community are the only ones with the power to change the covenants. That will not change if this petition passes. Currently the non-voting members of the community are the ones with the power to stop all change. In the future, if this passes, if people abstain from voting, they will not influence the outcome as long as we receive 750 ballots back from the membership. If 500 of those are yes, the covenant will change. We need to let the votes dictate our direction, not the non-votes. Now for the detail behind the answer. In video number 2, what the heck are bylaws and covenants and why should I care? I spoke about the process by which our governing documents may be changed. In a nutshell, bylaws are changed after the board attorney provides a draft of the requested changes and the board votes whether or not to adopt the changes. Once that's done, the newly adopted version of the bylaws is filed with Putnam County and it becomes legally binding. The community may offer input at the board review and vote, but the community does not actually vote on the change. I also describe the covenant change process. When a covenant change is proposed, our attorney drafts language consistent with the proposal. Once that language has been reviewed, a ballot petition is drafted and mailed to every lot owner in our community along with a printed copy of the new covenants. This effort will also include enclosing the frequently asked questions document to help property owners better understand the issues. Ballots include a deadline date for the POA to receive votes for or against the petition. The ballot also identifies the total number of yes votes required for the petition to pass, 1991. This year's petition will also include a request for your current email address to update our records. Providing that email address is not required to make your vote valid. Our covenants, like our bylaws, were written in 1970-something. Over the years our bylaws have been changed many times. During that 40+ years since they were written our covenants have been updated a total of 0 times. That is right, not a single change has been made to our covenants since the time they were written over 4 decades ago. Consider this thought, where were you 40 years ago? What has changed in your life over the last 4 decades? You've had to adapt to the uses of new technologies, tools, information, and standards over the 40 years, right? County, state, and national laws have changed in that time to meet the galloping pace of change. Our covenants have not changed. Not at all. Your board of directors regularly receives requests from the community to permit or introduce things that our community feels are needed. When a request for a change is received, the first thing the board does is determine whether the covenants, bylaws, or any of our rules or policies prohibits the request. If the request is prohibited, we must change our governing documents, bylaws/rules/policies/covenants, before the requested change is permitted. The board has the authority to approve changes to the rules, bylaws, and policies, but only if the requested change does not conflict with the covenants. If the covenants prohibit the change, it's a deal breaker. Period. Why is it a deal breaker? Because in the 40+ years since they were authored, we've not a single time been able to change them. I repeat, not a single time. And why haven't we been able to change them a single time? It is simply because, try as we may, and regardless the number of times we've sent and resent ballots out for vote, we've not been able to get enough returned ballots to pass a single issue. In fact, we typically only receive about 50% of the ballots we send to the community. If you consider that there are 2,986 slots in Heritage Lake, if 50% of the lots vote, that brings us 1,493 votes. Even if the vote was a unanimous 1,493-0 in favor of the covenant change, we would still remain nearly 500 votes short of our ability to approve the change. This is so because 1,991 votes in favor of any covenant change, 66 2/3 majority of all lots, are required for a covenant change vote to pass. The implications of this to our community and maybe our safety could be profound in the event of an environmental emergency, or any other critical and time-sensitive challenge which might face our association if our covenants restrict our acting in prompt, efficient and proper ways to resolve the challenge. Under our current covenants, we would be powerless to react. Contrary to some comments and conspiracy theories on social media, the POA board has no emergency powers to set aside the covenants. Surely, appealing to the courts in an emergency is an option, but appeals take time. Time which we may not have. I do not believe our covenants are broken and many of the restrictions in the covenants remain reasonable. I do believe the restrictions which govern our ability to change the covenants themselves are unreasonable. I agree that the entire community should be able to vote on every covenant issue before us. But as we stand now, those who actually vote have no voice. This is so because there are more folks who do not vote. Because of the 66 2/3 majority of our total lots requirement, this no vote fraction of lot owners have both the loudest and the final voice. Think about that. Our state and national elections are based on the ballots cast, not on ballots that were never cast. This is where we are. Those not voting, not living here, some of whom have never seen Heritage Lake and many who live in other states control our destiny. We ourselves are powerless. In past covenant change initiatives, the board has heard there are fears that changing the covenants would somehow give the board more power to manipulate and change the covenants in the future. The fact of the matter is that the board cannot possibly gain those extra powers, because this proposed change to the covenants continues to give all powers to voters to pass any change, including any covenant changes which could propose the board be given more power. The board can't just take power or change the covenants to grant themselves more power. Voters alone pass covenant changes, and unless the voters vote to change that in the future, that will continue to be the way we govern ourselves going forward. The board currently has zero power in covenant changes, and will not gain any additional powers should this ballot pass. Period. In this second video, what the heck are covenants and bylaws and why should I care? I talked about the recommendations in the strategic plan regarding its observation that our governing process and rules are not able to support our growing community and the issues that come with that growth. The observations of the strategic plan remain as a primary driver in our need to continue this government change initiative. The 2017-18 effort included a series of 3 different mailings to encourage all lot owners to vote. Regardless the effort, still fewer than 50% of the ballots were returned. Nearly 70% of those returned ballots were yes votes to change the covenants. But we couldn't make the changes because we didn't receive the required 2/3 of all lot owner ballots. Because it was clear to the board that among those who did vote, those in our community affected by the proposed changes, the overwhelming majority were in favor of the proposed changes, we are acting on behalf of those members of the majority. For those who didn't return their ballots, there's no way to determine whether their non-response was because they assumed their vote would be counted as a no, not considered at all, or they didn't understand the reason for or the implications of the vote. So we're trying again. I hope this helped you understand why this government change is such a big deal. It has the potential to give the people in this community the ability to request and vote on changes in our governance that may be deemed outdated, and also to add new rules where it makes sense to do so. This has the potential to empower you, not take power away. I hope you consider this when you cast your vote. Whether you agree or disagree, I encourage you to cast your vote and return your ballot. Both the bylaws and covenants are available at your request from the office or on the HLPOA website. I continue to encourage you to ask questions or discuss anything around this initiative with any board member. We want to help. We want you to vote, and in so doing, we want you to understand what you are voting on. This was the 4th in the series of 8 videos created to help explain the covenant campaign.
Hello everyone, my name is Chris Schaefer. I'm the president of the Heritage Lake POA Board of Directors. This video is 5th in a series of 8 to help define the issues before us with the current covenant ballot out for community vote. Hopefully you've already seen the first 4, and if so, I applaud you for coming back for more. That's really awesome. This video will talk to the specific issues on the petition. The last video in the series, number 8, will cover how to complete the petition itself. The focus here will be to speak to issues in basic terms instead of legalese. The legal definitions and wording will be on the petition, and the petition will also include a copy of the covenants. Though this is a simplified explanation, I also encourage you to read the copy that will be sent in the mail and ask any questions you may have to me or any member of the board. The short answer to what the issues on the ballot are, in plain English, the ballot contains 3 basic areas of change. The first is combining six sets of covenants into one, changing 6 neighborhoods into a single community. The second is changing the required number of votes to pass an issue from 2/3 of all lot owners to 2/3 of returned ballots. That will also include a minimum of 750 votes required to be returned for a petition to pass. 2/3 of those would need to be yes votes, or 1/3 no to stop the petition. Ballots would also be sent to members in good standing and not all lot owners as they are now. A member in good standing means their membership has not been suspended for failure to pay dues or any other violation. The third is making any approved covenant change effective from the date they're filed with the county instead of 3 years after an approved change, as it is now. We get immediate benefit. This is the long answer portion of the answer, as I will speak to each of these more in great detail. First area of combining 6 sets of covenants into a single set is going to be covered in Covenants Article Section 2. Right now we have a set of covenants for each of our 6 neighborhoods. Most people don't know that. The content of them all is the same as far as the rules define, but the date they were each filed is different, as each of the neighborhoods was established on different dates. Remember, this was a community developed with the view of it being a community of 6 neighborhoods, not just a single community. So the impact of having 6 individual neighborhoods technically having their own covenants is that if a ballot currently fails in just one of those neighborhoods, It's enough to fail a vote for the entire community. Additionally, no individual neighborhood can change their covenants independently from the other neighborhoods, so there's really no benefit of having separate covenants. The proposed change would mean that the covenants are defined for our community and not each single neighborhood. One question people had when we had this out last year was whether this may change their address, and the answer is no. The second area is changing the required number of votes required to pass a change from 2/3 of all lot owners to 2/3 of vote cast by members in good standing. That's covered by Covenants Article 8. This is probably the biggest element of the petition, with the biggest implication if passed. As you may know, there have been numerous attempts to make changes to our covenants over the years. One of the hot-button topics that many folks have requested is the approval of sheds or mini barns. Because the covenants explicitly forbid them in Article 7, Section 1, where it states no building shall be erected, altered, placed, or permitted to remain on any lot other than one single-family dwelling not exceeding 2.5 stories in height, and one private garage or boathouse, or combination garage and boathouse for family automobiles and boats, in keeping with the dwelling so erected. The A&E Committee and Board cannot approve of those requests because of this covenant restriction. Though this petition in no way will allow mini barns, it will give us an opportunity to take the issue to the community for vote to consider a change to that rule in the future. There are other restrictions needing updating, some of which recognizes progress changes in our county ordinances and Indiana laws, adjacent issues relating to road maintenance, signage, and emergency rules in the event of an environmental disaster. But I've said several times in the previous videos, our covenants cannot be changed without a 2/3 approval of all lots in the community. The voting process restrictions have prevented our community from changing the covenants previously. We were unable to get the required number of votes either in favor or against the issues on the ballot. Petitions may be submitted to the POA via U.S. mail, email attachment, in-person, fax, or text photo. It's important to underscore simply by reviewing our voting options just how out of date and unworkable our covenants are now. Think about how things have changed. 3 of the methods of supporting and submitting votes are everyday tools in our current society, where when the covenants were first written, we went door to door and had to mail everything. The proposed 2/3 rule will also require that a minimum of 750 votes must be cast by the community in order for any change to be passed. This gives us assurance that no small group of persons may be able to make changes. If 2/3 of those votes cast are in favor of the petition, it will be passed. Lastly, ballots will only be sent to members in good standing who are members who have not had their privileges suspended for any reason, including failure to pay assessments or dues. As a reminder, this ballot vote will be sent to every lot owner as legally required. If this petition passes, future petitions will only be sent to all members in good standing. A member in good standing hasn't had their membership suspended for failure to pay dues or any other violation. Petitions or ballots will be sent to every eligible voting member of the association. The third element of this petition is there's a proposed change on the ballot to change the current date on which an approved change becomes effective from 3 years, as it is now, to immediately when filed as proposed in this ballot, and that's Covenants Article Section 2, or Covenants Article 2, I'm sorry. This means that once a voting event has ended, and assuming the issue being voted upon passes, the date that it goes into effect is that of when it was filed with the county. Our lawyer would perform that task, so there would likely be a small delay to complete the administrative work before that happens. Currently, our covenants require a 3-year waiting period from the time of a voted change to the time it becomes effective. The downside of the current 3-year restriction is that it significantly delays implementation of a rule which allows something our community believes is important. We would miss 3 years of benefit as a community. No covenant can be changed without every member of the community being sent a petition. There have been issues in the past with some members saying they have not received a petition, or of the POA receiving petitions returned as undeliverable. The covenants state that as long as every reasonable effort was made to send the petition to the last known address, and in the future this will include email address, fax number, text, etc., the requirement has been satisfied. That is why we have been aggressively asking all members to ensure their contact information is up to date at the office. The work and expense to manage undeliverable ballots costs all members in our community time and money out of our budget that it takes to resend them, call folks, etc. So that's the summary of the issues before you in this petition. Voting yes means you're in favor of the proposed changes. Voting no means you are not. This is all or nothing. You can't vote yes for one issue but no for the other. For every lot you own, you get one vote. You cannot split yes and no votes between your lots. Yes is for all, no is for all. Your petition will identify the lot or lots that you're voting, and you must be sure to sign and date your ballot before you return it. You will also notice that mailing your ballot is not your only option. You can fax, email, text, or vote on the website shown on the petition. Your petition mailer will contain a lot of information. It will contain the petition itself, some frequently asked questions, as well as the copy of the covenants. I encourage you to make an effort to understand the issues before you cast your vote. If you have any questions, please contact me or any member of the board. The board will hold open forums after each board and operations meeting for the remainder of this year. Board meetings are at 7 p.m. the second Monday of each month. Operations meetings are the last Monday of each month. These open forums will allow all members to come and ask questions or discuss anything you want around this ballot. We will also be visible at community events at the marina throughout this year. We are here to help you. We are here for you. Whether you are for or against this petition, please cast your vote so the return ballots reflect what this community wants. In the past, people have abstained from voting, thinking that either they weren't impacting the results, or they were unsure of the issues, or maybe just didn't care. But not voting does not tell the board how the community feels. Not voting, in a way, is like voting against the petition. This is so because it is the number of votes required to pass a petition that is the requirement. If you do not vote, effectively you are voting no, since the vote threshold cannot be reached. If you are against the issues up for vote, just vote no. Please return your ballot. If you think about it, we need 2/3 of votes to be yes to pass an issue. That means we need 1/3 of votes to be no to fail an issue, as long as we get the required number of ballots returned. If people didn't vote because they were against the issues on the ballot, or for the other reasons I just stated, the board has no way of knowing your desires. The board cannot act on the community's behalf if your voice isn't being heard through the voting. We don't know what the majority voice is. Unfortunately, hearing from a small segment of our population does not give us the full picture. Please vote. Help us work on those things which the majority of us value. Thank you for your time and your effort to understand what all of this is about. Please vote and encourage your friends and neighbors to do the same. This was the 5th in a series of 8 videos created to help explain the covenant petition. Hello everyone, my name is Chris Schaefer. I'm the president of the Heritage Lake Property Owners Association Board of Directors. This video is the 6th in a series of 8 to help us define the issues before us with the current covenant ballot out for community vote. We're 3/4 of the way there. Hopefully you've already made it through the first 5 videos. This video will explain one of the issues that several people had previously voiced concerns about during the ballot run last year. There was a fear that the proposed changes would somehow give the Board of Directors powers that they didn't already have, or give them the ability to manipulate the voting process to push issues through. This will help answer that concern. The short answer to what power the Board of Directors has now and how it will change with this ballot is this. There will be no difference. Right now, only the board votes on rule changes and bylaw changes. The board has no authority to approve covenant changes. Only voting members of the community have the power to approve covenant changes. If this ballot passes, in the future, it will be the community that approves any future changes to the covenants. The board does not now, and will not in the future, have the power to change the covenants. Additionally, the board does not have the power or authority to manage the voting process. That is done by an independent group. We have an election committee that helps with that. The only involvement that the board has with respect to covenant changes is to evaluate requests to make the changes, work with the lawyer to define and document the new revised covenant, ballot, and associated documents to be included as information to all eligible voting members of the community, and to support the education, petition ballot campaigns to encourage members to vote. Now for the detail behind the answer. If you watch What's the Difference Between Rule, Bylaw, and Covenant Changes, you learn that depending upon what kinds of changes are being requested, the method by which voting happens differs. Changes to rules, like lake rules, A&E rules, campground rules, all those things are defined as rules. They require a member or committee to propose that change to the board, which then votes on it or requests additional clarification or definition. A consideration of that ruling is whether the request is in violation of any bylaws, covenants, or Indiana state or local laws. Changes to the bylaws proposed by the board of directors or sometimes our attorney. The board defines that request during open board or operations meetings, votes on it, typically twice at open meetings, then takes it to the lawyer for approval. Changes to covenants can only be made through community vote or approval. The board has no influence to overrule or bypass community vote. Additionally, there are legal restrictions and rules governing how that voting process is managed, with respect to anonymity, ballot distribution or mailers, and how the votes are counted. The board can't modify those processes. As a side note, a concern from the last ballot was that the board would have more freedom to change the assessment fees as a result of this ballot. Again, the board has no authority or ability to do that without a vote from the community. As assessments are documented in the covenants, they cannot be modified by the board. Any proposed change to the covenants now and in the future can only happen if the community votes in favor of making those changes. The current covenant change will support a voting process whereby 2/3 of community votes cast on any issue will be sufficient to make a change, whereas today it requires 2/3 of all lot owners to vote for a change. This will give the voting members of the community more power, not the board. An additional element to consider is only members in good standing will be eligible to vote in the future, whereas today all lot owners, regardless of whether they're delinquent in their assessments or dues, or if they've had their membership suspended, are eligible to vote as long as they still own lots. It does not make sense to allow that, so the members in good standing wording was added. Another concern, which also had previously been voiced, was that the board, should this petition pass, could selectively send petitions to certain members of the community to ensure a change would pass. Article 3, Section 2 of the Covenant states, each member shall be entitled to one vote for each lot that he owns, or in which he owns in fee, or in which he has an interest as a land contract purchaser. This means first that the board cannot legally restrict who the ballot goes to. It must go to every member owning a lot or lots within the community. The only change to that going forward is that only members in good standing will receive ballots. Ballots are sent to every eligible member. That will not change. The only difference is that only ballots that are returned will be counted to determine the outcome. And even that has a qualification that at least 750 ballots must be returned, which ensures that a minimum of 25% of all lots must vote. This again gives the voting members of the community the power, not the board, and not those who do not vote. In fact, during last year's ballot campaign, we constantly requested those who hadn't received a ballot or cast a vote to do so. We remailed the ballot to those who hadn't yet cast theirs, 3 times in fact. I reached out numerous times on Facebook, and we talked about it in nearly all board meetings last year. This board wants the community to vote to help us better represent you. You may think, oh, that's great, but what happens when members of today's board move on? Good question. But consider that all board meetings are open to all members, recorded on YouTube, and membership is encouraged to attend. We live in this community with you. We share the lake and are at community events with you. I can tell you from personal experience that no one wants to sit at those tables in front of you or walk amongst you and have to answer questions to things that we've decided or done that you don't agree with. My and every other board member's time on the board is limited. We will not sit on the board forever. There is constant board turnover by design. The decision we make as board members will impact us just like they will you. I don't want to walk away from my time on the board and 5 years down the road regret a decision that we've made because it somehow weakens our community. I want to live here for a very long time and in no way want to jeopardize my little slice of heaven on earth. I love this community and I want it to thrive for years and years to come. The changes we may make in the future will still receive the careful legal scrutiny from our council that they do today. We must comply with all laws that govern how covenants are changed, and bylaw changes must be written and approved by our lawyer before ever going to the community for vote. At some point, you have to get involved and communicate with us and take control of what happens in this community. The power really is with you. Everyone in the community will continue to have that power in the future, but only those who vote can really make the change that the community wants. Both the bylaws and covenants are available at your request from the office or the HLPOA website. If you have any questions about this or the other videos or general questions around the ballot initiative, please reach out to me or any board member. We are happy to answer your questions or address your concerns. We want what's best for this community, and we truly believe this is. This was the 6th in a series of 8 videos created to help explain the Covenant campaign. Hello everyone, my name is Chris Schaefer. I'm the president of the Heritage Lake POA Board of Directors. This video is the 7th video in the 8-part series to help explain the issues before us with the current Covenant ballot currently out for community vote. Hopefully you've already seen the previous 6 videos, which help explain the different issues on the ballot, along with some background on what the bylaws and covenants are, what the Board of Directors is responsible for, and why this ballot is being communicated so extensively. If you haven't watched the other videos, I encourage you to do so. They're only a few minutes long, and they should help answer some of your questions, or even prompt you to raise more questions. This video will help explain why this ballot is so important to our community. The short answer is the Board of Directors strongly encourages all members to vote your ballot in the proposed covenant changes. This and previous boards have been in favor of these changes because it allows the community to better govern itself. The board is in a position where we must uphold the rules and regulations defined for our community. Obviously, there are many of them. Some are legally binding, and all defined in the covenants are legally binding. This means even if the board agrees in principle that an idea is a good one, or if there is something our community would benefit from, the board cannot act to support a petition or ballot to the community to vote in the change without literally years of work to try and obtain the required number of votes to make it happen. Changing our covenants has historically been an impossible task. I know you've heard 100 times already that since they were drafted 40 years ago, they've never been changed. We've not been able to address outdated restrictions or add improved ideas or take advantage of advances in technology or tools not yet invented 40 years ago. We are unable to help our community grow, not just in numbers or development areas, but grow by being able to better govern ourselves and better manage our infrastructure and resources. Now for the detail behind the answer. The covenants were written strictly from the point of view of the developer, who authored them in the interests of his development of our community while the neighborhoods were being developed. It helped to maintain control over his vision. They supported an idea of 6 individual neighborhood entities, not a single community of about 1,000 people who identified themselves as Heritage Lake residents. Over the 40-plus years since we've grown to a community of around 3,000 property owners, our cars, boats, homes, and environment have significantly changed. Our needs have changed too. We require more agility if we're able to more effectively manage today's issues which should be reflected by rules which incorporate the needs and opinions of our community today and not the needs of a developer 40-plus years ago. As it stands now, those who do not vote control our very destiny at Heritage Lake. We simply are unable to make changes since over 1,900 affirmative votes are required to make any changes to the covenants. This reality has prevented us from doing so many important things, even though a large majority of those active and living in our community favor those changes. In the vote for the covenant change last year, ballots received were more than 70% in favor of changing the covenants as proposed. We are committed to working extremely hard to encourage all 8 Heritage Lake POA members to vote this year. We will be highly visible at fundraisers, community events at the marina, and we'll be working really hard to be available to you to answer questions or have any discussions around any of the issues up for vote. The success of this vote is critical to the future success of our community. I've heard a lot of things now coming into my 3 years on the board. I listen to complaints, ideas, and the perspective and points of view of others. I also offer my perspective and feedback as much as I'm able. I've made myself available to answer questions and clarify the reasons for the way some things are in our community. I hope that I've been able to demonstrate to this community that the board does care about what this community wants and needs. But very frequently, we are prevented from acting upon what we view is in our best interests because some of the restrictions, because of what we must live by in our covenants. Don't get me wrong. I believe our community is awesome. We have a great mix of diverse interests as far as on the water, off the water, skiers, boaters, fishermen, and those who just want to quietly sit on their dock, porch, or at the beach. Our existing covenants have carried us a really long way. They have somewhat stood the test of time. If we are to manage our future more effectively, if we are to seize control of our own destiny and direction, we must have rules and standards which ensure our community will make it through the next 40 years for ourselves, our children, our grandchildren. It's time to dust off the old rules and begin anew, to dig into those things we need to change to better address the challenges we currently face and redefine our rules and guidelines in ways which help us better manage where we want our community to be in 5, 10, and 20 years and beyond. My fellow members, it all starts with our making this critical initial step of making it possible for us to govern ourselves. I am referring to the 2/3 majority requirement of all votes to change our covenants versus the current 2/3 majority vote of all lots. Once done, we will have the opportunity as a community to shape and define our future. By rallying together around the ideas we support, we can choose to make them part of us and shape our destiny. We can also reject those ideas we choose not to adopt. I feel these proposed covenant changes will give us the best chance to sustain the future of this community, making us more able to quickly react to our needs. The power will be with those who vote. The board of directors is and always will be made up of members of our community who live here and have the same things at stake that you do. We want to take care of our resources and our people. These changes will help us do just that. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me and to give these issues some careful, thought before casting your vote. However you feel, let it be known by casting your vote. If you can't find your petition, burned it, or the dog ate it, you can pick one up at the clubhouse office, marina, print one off from the website, or call and ask the office to send you another one. You now may cast your vote in a variety of ways. Duplicate submissions will be identified and the latest one discarded to ensure no duplicate ballots are cast. You have the power. Make your voice heard. Hello everyone, my name is Chris Schaefer. I'm the president of the Heritage Lake POA Board of Directors. This video will show you exactly what areas you need to complete on the petition to make your vote valid. The vote is whether or not the covenant changes proposed by the Heritage Lake Board of Directors should be approved. There were 7 other videos to help in the understanding of the issues before us, and you have had or will have opportunities to ask questions or get clarification prior to casting your vote. This video is about the ballot itself. You will see a sample ballot after this video that will display for you what I'm about to speak to. You may notice that this is called a petition and not a ballot. Technically, this is referred to as a petition in order to have the vote conform to Indiana laws. The petition is what is being considered in the physical ballot that you're casting. The second thing to note is at the top left corner of the ballot, account number and lot number are requested. If you're submitting a ballot that has been mailed to you, this area will have already been filled out for you. If you've picked up a ballot at the marina or clubhouse or off the website or another location, these will not yet be filled out. That's okay, but it's critical that you complete this information prior to submitting the petition to the POA. If you do not, your ballot will be invalidated and disqualified. The petition requires the lot number or numbers to determine if the person submitting the ballot has a right to vote. You may include all lot numbers and you will be credited with multiple votes at 1 per lot. There is a caution that if you vote more than one lot and you are not on the deed of all lots, your entire petition may be invalidated. When in doubt, call or drop by the POA office and the staff there can confirm whether there are different voting rights within your household. If ballots are not completed in full, they will be invalid. The areas highlighted in yellow are those areas that you need to complete. Obviously, you won't vote both yes and no, so choose the one you want by inserting an X in that box. Do not circle yes or no above those boxes, just insert your X in the yes or no boxes to indicate your choice. This means that you agree to all 3 elements of the ballot. For refresher, those 3 elements are: number 1, combining the 6 neighborhood covenants into a single set of community covenants. Number 2, changing the requirement from 2/3 of all lot owners to 2/3 of votes cast on any future ballot, along with a 750 vote minimum and a restriction that only members in good standing may vote to pass an issue up for vote. The third element is changing the date a covenant change becomes effective from 3 years to immediately after the change is filed with the county after an affirmative vote by the community. Next, you'll see a bunch of words that state the number of lots in the community, how many approvals are necessary to approve the covenant change, that you've had the opportunity to view the covenant changes prior to casting your vote, and the date before which your ballot must be submitted. That information is all required to be communicated to you to constitute this as a legal vote. You will have received the covenant changes and frequently asked questions along with your ballot. If you do not understand the issues, changes, or have any questions, please contact a member of the board or the office to get the answers you need to cast your vote. The date indicates that all ballots must be returned by September 30th, 2020 in order to be counted. We encourage everyone to return your ballot as soon as you're able, though, to reduce the cost of sending out multiple ballots and mailers to try to capture those whose ballots have not yet been received. We sent the ballots out 3 times last year, which obviously adds up as far as costs go. It's a huge administrative burden to identify and mail those who've not yet voted. We will be giving those numbers regularly from those managing the ballots. There are 4 fields that you must fill out: signature, printed name, the date, and the Heritage Lot number, which is your Heritage Lake address. Do not use another address if your Heritage Lake lot is not your primary address. You are voting for your lots, which must be identified here by you. We solicit your current email address too on this petition. It's not required, but we need it badly to improve our electronic communication going forward. Lastly, you will see that there are 5 ways to return your ballot. You can use the method you're most comfortable with. New this year, you'll be able to electronically cast your vote. Your POA presently has email addresses of about 1/3 of the total lot owners. We do not know how accurate the list is, and we probably have some duplication where both owners have emails on our list. So if you don't know whether the office has your latest email address or whether they have one at all, give them a call or stop in so you can take advantage of the benefits of online voting. Everyone who's on that list at the office will be sent a link from an online voting vendor. That email will include a link to a site which will instruct you to register. Once registered, the site will pre-populate your petition with all lots the vendor has been notified you own. If you have separate ownership of multiple lots in your household, and if a different email address is associated with each lot, vote registration links will be sent to both votes, for both votes. Make sense? With respect to the other methods of electronic voting, you can return your ballot to a secure fax number, 866-368-9427, text a picture of your completed ballot to a secure dedicated number, 765-366-0441, or email it to a secure dedicated site, which is hlvote@outlook.com. If you have any questions, please ask a member of the board or contact the office. Thank you for taking the time to learn about what this voting request is all about. Please vote your lots. If you're still confused by any of the information you've heard, please just let me or any board member know, and we'll do what we can to try to help clarify anything that's still unclear. We are here to help.